Welcome into Can We Just Talk? Again, the podcast where it doesn't matter if you're living under a rock. We'll fill you in on what you missed from this past week's biggest events, stories, and developments in a nice casual conversation. Again, this is Troy DiSavino, joined alongside by Austin DiSavino.
Yo!
On today's episode, we get to some of the biggest stories, including 2020's second presidential campaign debate canceled between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. We've got an issue of outer space pollution, a hidden treasure found in a British garage worth nearly $500,000, a crazy kidnapping plot against the Michigan governor, a heroic rescue story from the Ivory Coast Police, and finally, a crazy social experiment called the New Leaf Project that takes a deeper look at what it could mean for some of the less fortunate in this country if they just have a little financial help. Let's get rolling. Story number one to get to today in this episode. The Commission on Presidential Debates on Friday canceled the second debate between President Donald Trump and Joe Biden after the president declined to do a virtual debate despite concerns over his COVID-19 diagnosis. Organizers said, again, this coming from CNN. The biggest story coming from last week probably was Donald Trump being diagnosed with COVID. Because of that, there was supposed to be another presidential debate coming up in this next coming week. Obviously, with Donald Trump having COVID-19, obviously some tests are coming back negative at this point, but there was some concern whether or not this debate was going to be able to happen. Following just 2 weeks prior, there was a huge fiasco on stage between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of talk about people wanting to see that happen again. Now, the proposed plan, which Donald Trump shot down, was to hold a virtual debate.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was very strong against that's not what this is about. He wants it to be in person. He said, I've tested negative. Why? If we're not doing this in person, I'm not doing it at all. Joe Biden, soon after Trump said no to this plan, Joe Biden came out, even though it didn't really matter, saying, I'm open to doing it virtual. Because of that, we're not 100% sure what we're going to see on the debate stage, I guess you could say, but we know Donald Trump will not be there.
Yeah.
This coming out is a very interesting side of the story. Right now, Donald Trump is actually losing in the polls. These debates are usually a tool for the candidate that has fallen behind in the polls to help kind of get some ground back.
Yep.
President Trump has believed that the debates are going to be a stage for him to be able to take down Joe Biden. Joe Biden is known for not being the most eloquent speaker.
Yeah.
Even though he's performed pretty well so far on his campaign trail, but yeah, it's a bit surprising to see Donald Trump saying no to this opportunity. Obviously, there's still one more debate opportunity left after this.
Which would be the end of October, which would be right before the election. It's just really interesting to see because I don't think it's a no-win situation for the Trump campaign. They're canceling, they're showing that they're not willing to work with anyone here. And it just looks bad if he's not able to get out there and craft any sort of rhetoric or theme that. And I don't know who's still undecided in this election. And if you are undecided, I don't know what actions are drawing you towards Trump. That's my personal opinion. That's not the news. That's just my opinion here. And I think just to round out my thoughts on this are, it just shows lack of willing to work with others on the president's side. If the entire country can go virtual from March, I've been doing nothing but Zoom and Microsoft Team meetings. Schools, children in first grade and kindergarten are able to effectively learn via video, and the president's not willing to have a video conversation. I also do think it's a good thing that we know why this is happening this way.
Yeah, earlier this week, Trump's campaign spokesperson, Tim Murtaugh, came out with a statement saying there's no medical reason to stop the October 15th debate in Miami from proceeding as scheduled since the president will be healthy and ready to debate. He also went on to say there is also no reason there shouldn't be 3 total presidential debates. As Joe Biden had originally agreed, we have suggested using October 22nd and October 29th to hold the final 2 debates. It's time for the bias commission to stop protecting Biden and preventing voters from hearing from the 2 candidates for president. So Trump's side is coming out saying, hey, why don't we just do it back-to-back weeks? Biden saying, why don't we just do it virtual? I don't see what's the problem there. And Trump has made it very clear that he doesn't want to do that. We saw earlier this week the vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence. That was a lot better moderated.
There was a lot of buzz around it.
So yeah, fly landed on Mike Pence's head and had kind of camped out there back and forth, coming and going. That was the biggest story, which is it's a better big story than, you know, our two leaders of the free world are making a joke of our country on stage.
Yeah.
But it was a much better moderated debate, in my opinion. We heard
I saw a lot of other opinions saying that it was worse.
There was more of one person talking at a time. That's what I mean to say.
Yeah, okay. All right.
It wasn't two people talking over each other the entire single time. You know, we heard questions weren't being answered directly from both sides. Mike Pence was dodging questions, Kamala Harris was dodging questions. But we've seen that in pretty much every debate in the past. But the nice part was you could understand what was being said, because for most of the time one person was speaking. There was a lot of highlighted moments from Kamala Harris coming back and snapping at Mike Pence, saying, "I'm talking, so wait your turn." But it was a much easier to listen to conversation that you could actually understand. They did it in a sitting down situation. They had the plexiglass up, but it was a lot nicer to watch. So the biggest story going forward is, this debate has been pretty much canceled. Like I said, we'll see what Joe Biden decides to do. I think he's going to have the floor to use that time for himself. In return, President Trump is holding a rally, which he will be attending. These rallies have been known to not, ask people to wear masks the entire time.
They're super spreader events.
Yeah, now the person that's running this event is someone who is just coming out of, being in the hospital earlier this week. So, there's a lot of talk about what that's going to look like.
It's interesting to see what Trump's campaign is going to do here. I find it a little bit hypocritical where you were saying, I think you quoted Trump's campaign saying that the commission is biased in not allowing for a debate to happen, yet the commission presented a possible solution that was rejected by the Trump campaign. And also, too, with the vice presidential debate, two things. I think it was like, what's the saying in politics where whoever is better at being more professional of answering the question they wish the person asked rather than actually answering the question, which is what a lot of these debates in political speak is. But some of the things that I had seen is that vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris was carrying the weight of women all over who have been spoken over and spoken on top of for a very long time. So I thought those dynamics were interesting to watch. I think she presented herself, or stood up for herself very well, but it's just going to be interesting to see how all these different things play out, because we're a month away, right? So that's coming up in about 4 weeks is the election, and we've yet to have the second debate. We don't know when it's happening. We don't know if the third one is happening or when it's happening.
Again, coming from Dan Merica of CNN, the cancellation is a political loss for Trump, who is down in all national polls and either behind or tied with Biden in key swing states. The loss of a debate deprives the president of a platform that he needs at a time when his campaign is trailing. The first debate between Trump and Biden, a chaotic affair, was watched by more than 73 million people, so you can see the type of audience that he gets. Again, that coming from CNN. And just to kind of conclude this, another quote, it is fair to say it is looking like Miami will be canceled. A source familiar with today's negotiations told CNN. I don't think there is any movement on either side that will make Miami happen. So again, looking like the second presidential debate for the 2020 election between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden will be canceled. Next up, we got another story coming out from CNN. This one dates all the way back to 1978, but kind of reemerged this week. So to start off, coming from CNN, is a quote: "In 1978, NASA scientist Donald Kessler warned of a potential catastrophic cascading chain reaction in outer space. Today known as the Kessler syndrome, the theory posted that space above Earth could one day become so crowded, so polluted with both active satellites and the detritus of space exploration's past, that it could render future space endeavors more difficult, if not impossible." Now, the more recent side of this is last week, the CEO of Rocket Lab, a launch startup, said the company is already beginning to experience the effect of growing congestion in outer space. this being just the most recent story about how humans are destroying the environment around them, not even inside of our atmosphere now. Now there is somehow pollution in outer space. Some of the biggest issues, there are just so many, I guess you could say, just debris from past launches. There's satellites floating around out there. Obviously it looks a little different than, the plastic pollution you'd see in the ocean, but it can be really harmful to a launch. Those things are perfectly planned out. It's
a finite space. Well, space itself is not a finite space, but the gravitational field around the Earth is, and where orbit paths are, is a finite space. And from the article you sent over, Troy, it was the treaty that governs the space of space. They got to think of a new word for that. Has been updated in 50 years, in 5 decades. So it's just, I think it's disappointing to see that this is coming up, and it goes to show two things: that you can't trust humans with anything nice because we're not going to respect it and we're not going to preserve it. And two is that if you leave self-governing to organizations that are focused not on preservation, then it's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because this report is catching a lot of attention because it's coming from a private company. It's coming from Rocket Lab's CEO, who's saying, like, this might be an issue because we're already experiencing these issues, and it seems like it might be way ahead. They call it orbital junkyards, which is really sad to hear.
Yeah, it is.
And again, coming from CNN, the quote is, researchers have warned for decades that congestion in outer space could have devastating consequences. Kessler's warning said that if space traffic becomes too dense, a single collision between two objects could set off a disastrous chain event reaction that effectively turns the space around Earth into an extraterrestrial wasteland. Continuing on, one piece of debris would hit a satellite, and that impact, much like a car crash, except at orbital speeds of upwards of 17,000 miles per hour, could generate hundreds, if not thousands, of new pieces of debris in its own right.
Is that how fast things are orbiting? I have that, my scope for space.
Things are pretty quick.
That's insane.
Things are pretty quick. You know how we talked about earlier today? What part of the wheel is fastest?
Right.
Things are revolving, they're fast. So those new pieces could hit other objects in orbit, which could hit other objects, and on until low Earth orbit, which would be saturated with increasing amount of uncontrolled projectiles. Again, this coming from CNN. So it's kind of like you just have a bunch of little. I mean, when things are flying at 17,000 miles per hour, upwards of that, I guess you could compare them to little bombs, because when they crash that hard, there is very hard impacts. By the way, this theory, Kessler syndrome, was the main plot of the 2013 movie Gravity, in which satellite shrapnel caused a cascade of disastrous satellite collisions. Again, this being pointed out by CNN. This was the topic. This was the focus of that movie.
So what you're saying is that this guy from Space Labs, is that who it's from? Basically, like, watched the movie and was like, "Yo, that's
real." Well,
that's kind of true.
Well, I think it probably came before.
I'm sure it did. But that sounds like it's an untapped market, right? Like, if you create a company that
space cleanup, waste management,
like 1-800.
Well, we have Space Force,
Space
now,
drones.
so
we have Space Force.
Have police now. We need garbage.
Send Steve Carell up there. But I'm sure companies would pay a lot of money to clean up that area, because that's how you make things global. That's how information is sent. I think our nations should have a vested interest in the preservation of our space, and also, like, if there's a way to get rid of things, like, is there a galaxy near us that we don't like? Just send that stuff over there. Like the galaxy equivalent of Philadelphia. Like, send all the junk.
Dumping stuff in the ocean. Let's just dump it somewhere else. That's fine.
Just send it not to the Milky Way, but to the kind of Milky Way.
So, coming from Mariba Jha, an astrodynamicist, this is way above.
Is that a real title?
At the University of Texas at Austin, he's a leading expert in space traffic. Said most of Earth's orbits below about 750 miles is becoming a danger zone. He created a database to help track potential collisions in space, and an online chart uses dots to show how many objects are expected to pass within 6 miles of each other every 20 minutes. So he hopes that as more satellite operators and companies, this including SpaceX and Rocket Lab, that we talked about, will share real-time location data of their rockets and satellites to make predictions more precise. So this is kind of playing around the issue. It's not exactly cleaning up the issue.
But isn't that wild, though, that there wasn't a database for that? Someone had to create it.
I find this very similar to, like, one of the issues we see, like, back in, like, the early 20th century when there was 2 cars on the road in Ohio and they somehow crash into each other. Because listen to that, it's within 6 miles of each other. That's the range, but it's still a danger.
But going at 17,000 miles
I guess
per
that's
hour.
like a second to get 6 miles. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's you can't like send up something to get in between them. But it seems like, we've only been in space for how many years now? I don't know when that was. Was that the 50s, 60s?
69, I think.
It shows that's
when we land on the moon.
Yeah, so that just shows how well versed I am in outer space. But it just seems like hey guys, maybe we shouldn't be doing it this way.
We're speeding up. I mean, that just goes to show you that humans can find a way to mess up literally everything on this earth and outside of it too now. Before we get to the next topic, earlier this week for our own big news, we officially made, a partnership. For myself, I'm still heavily involved with WRSU Sports. Cup, I guess you could say last year. It's been going on for about 2 years now. The WRSU crew has been, almost like a passion project for myself and the station, along with Chris Sakonis and Justin Santu. Last year, we were able to create the WRSU crew with everyone involved. From that came, one of our most loved segments, Can We Just Talk? A 10-minute segment where we just talk about random things that have nothing to do with sports. And from that, now comes this, an extended 25, 30-minute podcast where we talk about some of the weirder things, some of the more important things for every single week, just to have a good discussion to understand what's going on around us. So again, we are excited for that partnership. Make sure to stay tuned on WRSU Sports to hear more smaller segments of Can We Just Talk. We'll try to incorporate some of that, and along the way we'll have some people from WRSU Sports. Besides myself, who's still there, you can catch me on the Wednesday show of the crew with Chris Sakonis still. But we'll make sure to get some other people from the station, get some more familiar voices out here to get that partnership with the Can We Just Talk podcast and WRSU Sports alive. Now, with that being said, we've got a pretty crazy story coming out from the United Kingdom. This one, coming from Britain, I should say, some person hit the jackpot without buying a lottery ticket. They went to their garage, they were cleaning some stuff out, and they found a tiny teapot-shaped antique discovered in the garage in England during a lockdown clear-out. This little antique they found on Thursday turns out to be worth $497,000 American dollars. After they found this out, after it took it down to an auctioneer for a free valuation. Described by the British auction house Hanson's as the find of the year, the item was identified as a rare 18th century wine vessel known as a ewer that carries the mark of China's Qianlong Emperor. I think I said that right.
I would not know if it was wrong.
It's very small, weighs less than a pound. It's enamel and copper antique. It's decorated, has floral motif, and features a small handle on the spout. Very simple. You've probably seen a lot of things that look just like it, but this one is worth a lot. Apparently, it comes from the grandfather who the auction house believes acquired the item while stationed in the Far East during World War II. Must have brought it back. And now they've got it. And according to the Hansons, the seller had considered giving the object to a thrift store, and I thought our antiques expert might laugh when he brought it in for a free valuation. And it came in a bag. The guy was carrying it in a bag.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing that, first of all, how did this thing not break? I can't even keep things in my house from not breaking it for years.
It looks like
it's dainty.
But I don't know if it's made of like China. It's a very weird looking object.
I don't know.
It looks like almost like a metal box teapot.
Still though, but how old is it? And it didn't break. I mean, also to think about the honesty of the first person that saw this when they were bringing it for evaluation was like, hey, maybe you should look more into it. Think about the honesty of that person that could have gotten all this money. And imagine finding this in your garage. What's in my garage has an old sofa. Shout out anyone in North Jersey that's looking for a great sofa. Is it from
your grandfather who served in World War II and brought it back?
It's from South Florida.
Okay.
and it has a nice pull-out air mattress in it, and I still have the pump.
Sounds much more practical than this.
It would get more used to that. But also, that's the thing too. It's like, think about what we drink wine out of now. Like back then, it's like these fancy vessels for wine, and like here I am drinking a $4 bottle of wine out of the IHOP mug that I like took from a restaurant in 2013, and back then they used all these fancy things. So
I mean, it's unbelievable to see what they found and how much it turned out to be. It went to a live auction because with COVID-19 restrictions, there is no in-person. It went online, live streamed, and the item sold for $497,000 in under 12 minutes.
Imagine clicking the bid button
by accident. I think there's protocols set up so it's not directly linked to your Chase Sapphire credit card. So you got to
oh crap!
Please, someone outbid me. I mean, I don't think they're going to be using it too much, but I'd love to know. Like, I know it's old. I know it has history. Where does that valuation come from? How does it's just what makes it worth that much? I want to know. I know it has history behind it. I know it has significance in that culture, but like, and the same thing goes for me for like baseball cards. Like, what makes those pieces of paper worth so much? But when there's a market to buy it, there's a market to sell it, and there's a reason why it's worth so much. So
it's interesting too. Like when you look at antiques, like think about like what is the story behind how this ended up where it is. It's like that book you would read when you were a kid, The Tin Soldier or whatever, where he like goes on the paper boat and goes in the sewers. Like, what are the stories of these objects and how they end up being where they are?
This one wasn't on a paper boat. This one was on a warship from World War II. So look close.
Very similar parallels is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean that was a tin soldier. So
tin soldier.
All right, well, moving on. This next story, a little more serious, coming from BBC. This, in my opinion, was the most catching headline of the week.
Disturbing.
Unbelievable. Sounds like it's out of a movie. It sounds like it was out of The Purge or something. This story coming that the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, was moved around as the FBI tracked a militia plot for her kidnapping and her treason trial that was planned. So most likely her assassination at that point. There have been a total of 13 men who have been charged with this. Again, there was an in-depth FBI investigation following along. They had people on the inside. Who, at one point, there was talk about FBI agents going into this man's cellar. He had a trapdoor underneath his carpet on his first floor. In his store underneath, that's where they hold their meetings.
Oh my God.
And this person, they were checked for bugs and wires. This person had a hidden bug that they didn't find.
Really?
Like, this is straight out of a crazy movie.
That's like a bad episode of Criminal Minds.
Could you imagine being that FBI agent? Like,
oh my God.
You got 13 militia men who have got guns and they're just ready to...
That's scary. I'm glad that person was brave enough to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to mention the names or anything like that, but their charges are being charged with terrorism and gang-related offenses.
Good.
Those are some of the more minor ones too. And the 6 of them have been charged or accused in federal court of plotting the kidnap. It is a quite disturbing story. And it just, like I said, it sounds like it's almost out of a movie. But leading up to it, the FBI was so on top of it, they were moving, Governor Gretchen Whitmer around. Her and her family were being not kept in one place to keep her safe. So this plan was never, carried out. It was stopped before it even had a chance to get rolling. They had people on it. You have to wonder, how does the FBI have this so planned out? Like, how do they know this was going to happen way before it was going to happen? They had people on the inside.
That's good
leading
intel.
Up to the entire, seriously, how do they get this intel? It's crazy.
Yeah.
How far ahead they are of everybody else.
It's scary. It's scary that there are people in this country and in this world that have just such strong feelings and emotions, that these are actions that not just 1 or 2 or 3, but what was it, 13?
Yeah.
People felt strongly enough to really put plans behind and actions behind. It's just really scary. It's really sad. If there's something that you feel that vehemently against, there's not many things to have such extreme, strong opinions on in regards to this. And in situations like that, if you have feelings about how strongly you feel about certain things, like, maybe you just don't understand it enough, and it's just scary and it's sad, and I'm really glad that this was thwarted, and I hope this is looked into more to make sure that no more of this is happening anywhere else.
Yeah, she was. I mean, police believe and FBI believe she was the target. Specifically, she's gotten a lot of backlash from her approach to dealing with COVID. A lot of lockdown. There's a lot of. There's tension between both sides right now, and she was at the center of this in Michigan. People in her state alone, President Trump has come out, talking against he's being anti-lockdown, and Whitmer on the other side of things. So, this militia was out there to put her on a treason trial, which, I mean, I don't think it was going to be a very fair trial if it had happened. So.
In a basement, in a trapdoor. That doesn't sound like a fair trial.
Thank God, the FBI. As crazy it is to know that the intel that the FBI has, I'm much happier with knowing that the FBI is watching everything than having to know that things like this could happen every single day.
This is what we know about. Imagine what we don't know about.
Yeah,
that's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah, so absolutely nuts, and thank God nothing ever happened to her. She was in on
whether or not you agree with
it doesn't
her.
matter if you like
exactly that's what I'm saying.
So
it's
far behind.
It's like if you don't agree with something and you're starting to feel those emotions, try to understand it more, or please talk to someone. Those are not normal feelings.
To wrap up this episode, we've got two more stories for you. This first one is a happy story, a happy ending. The police from the Ivory Coast in Africa on Wednesday rescued 11 children and 2 teenagers working on a cocoa plantation in southwestern Ivory Coast, and they arrested 3 farmers on suspicion of people trafficking, and police commissioner said. Obviously, with everything going on in the cocoa plantations out there are a lot of issues with human trafficking, with unfair labor for children, being forced into those labor standards. I mean, a lot of these kids that are forced into these positions aren't being paid. It's almost indentured servitude. It's kids being taken from who knows where. So it's a really, really bad thing that's going on over there. There's thousands of kids who are in similar situations. Awful story, but in this side, it's great to hear 11 of those kids have been saved. Happily for them, they're out of that. Yeah. So great to hear. Again, 11 children, 2 teenagers saved. A
lot more work to be done, though. A lot more work. More than 1 million children work illegally on plantations like this in just that country alone.
Yeah. So
and that's not singling out that country. That's just this is a problem worldwide. So glad that small steps are being taken, and thankful for these actions. But this is a problem that is not exclusive to outside this country even.
To wrap up that story, in March, the police received more resources and opened 6 operational centers in the main cocoa producing regions to better combat child trafficking and labor. Now that they have, again, this quote coming now from Zaka, who is one of the officers on this entire operation. He said, "Now that we have more means, we can deploy faster to all corners and carry out these kinds of operations." Again, that one coming from Zaka. To wrap up this episode, we have a really interesting article coming out of CNN earlier today, actually. It's focused around the project called the New Leaf Project, which is an initiative of Foundations for Social Change, a charitable organization based in Vancouver in partnership with the University of British Columbia. In this, researchers gave 50 recently homeless people a lump sum of $7,500 Canadian dollars, which is equivalent to about $5,700 US dollars. The researchers followed the cash recipients' life over a 12 to 18 months span and compared their outcomes to that of a control group who didn't receive the payments. In this report, the preliminary findings, which will be peer-reviewed next year, they show that those who received this cash bonus, this lump sum of money, were able to find stable housing faster on average. This is being the biggest finding. By comparison, those who didn't receive cash lagged about 12 months behind in securing more permanent housing. The issue of the rising level of the homeless population in this country, in Canada as well, is definitely something that has been talked about
Yeah.
on a lot of local elections, even in the presidential election for the 2020 election. But this project yielded some really interesting results to show how just getting a little bit of a help, a push, a head start to rebuilding a life can really have positive impacts on some of these people's lives.
Yeah, I'm glad. I was really happy to read this article and about this study because I think, and again, I can only speak from my own experiences. I work in Manhattan, and there really are a lot. There's a large homeless population, and it's just saddening to see in Penn Station and just all over. And I think one of the really sad things that I've seen is what the perception is of the homeless population. A lot of people think, oh, they are that in that situation because of 100% their own fault, and that's really not the case in a lot of these situations. There's mental illness where there's no place for them to live. There's no group home they can get into. They've been released and no one to go to. There's substance abuse, and whether you think of it as an illness or you think of something that's 100% someone's personal responsibility, there's a lot of things that go into being homeless, right? So just off the bat. But I think this is the perfect hyperbole, right, for don't judge a book by its cover, because I was reading in that article is that most of these recipients, most of these people that are homeless that got this money knew exactly what they were going to do with it, right? So they knew, I'm going to go get a bike, I'm going to get a car, I'm going to get somewhere to live. And also what they saw in most of the cases is that purchases of things like alcohol and cigarettes went down when they got this larger lump sum of money, which I think is really interesting, right? If you look at it where, they're just going to spend it on cigarettes. It's like, okay, if I only have $15 a day and nowhere to sleep, and it's like, I'm living on the street, it's not like I have a bank to go put the money in. Yeah, I'm going to buy cigarettes. I'm going to buy some booze. But also, it just is, it's nice that to see, again, that people are inherently good. There's good in this world, and I know there's going to be pushback where it's like, oh, how are we going to give this money to everyone? But I think we need to be careful of not letting perfect get in the way of good.
Well, it's interesting you make that point. From this study comes the phrase, it's not a silver bullet, but a useful tool for many, which is, in reference to providing that lump sum to let people get a step ahead of things. From this program, one of the directors, Williams, offering a higher functioning subset of the homeless population, offering this cash to them, offering this monetary value. They found, people who received the cash infusions were even able to set some money aside, about 1,000 Canadian dollars on average through 12 months, providing some foundation for their future. They were managing their money well because they know what it's like to be out there homeless. Yeah. They know how much each dollar is worth to them. Yeah. And the money provided by the program also had trickle-down impacts, according to the article. And Williams, with people investing more in their children's well-being and needs, as well as helping out family members. Williams again saying there are these hidden impacts that we just don't anticipate and aren't necessarily quantifying by now. We're seeing that this is having an exponential effect on people's lives. Again, coming from Williams. The study also shows there are advantages for the taxpayer too. So this is from the other side of things.
Yeah, sure.
According to the research, reducing the number of nights spent in shelters by the 50 study participants who received cash saved approximately 8,100 Canadian dollars per person per year, or about 405,000 Canadian dollars over 1 year for all 50 participants. Now, that number that we just said, it was 8,100. The initial investment that was made was 7,500.
Yeah.
Therefore, this program that is taking place has the opportunity to possibly save taxpayer money.
And it's just frustrating because it's not going to get to that point, right? Because people are going to see the price tag up front.
It's interesting you say that because there's candidates in the near future who have already started mentioning this.
It's good.
Presidential candidate Andrew Yang from the Democratic Party has programs in place like that he would love to do about sending out checks monthly to American citizens to help them get past these things.
Sure.
There's a very big issue with low-income households with making it month to month, and you see the issues of credit card debt throughout this country. Providing some of this aid, and that's on a much higher level. This is this is the real poverty in America. This is the real poverty in Canada. These are the people who are living on the streets because they have nowhere else to go because of the cash issues they have, the money issues they have. But I think you're right. I think it's a positive story coming out of seeing what some good can do. And I think this was a really interesting study they did that had a really good outcome. It showed how much help it could really do for those 50 participants on both sides, saving the taxpayer money while also, setting up and providing a better life for these participants. So, a good way to end this one. Again, this is Can We Just Talk? Really enjoyed having the chance to kind of catch you guys up on what you may have missed from this week. Again, make sure to stay tuned. We're going to have some more content coming your way. Next episode 3, will be out next Saturday. Again, this was Can We Just Talk? Troy DiSavino and Austin DiSavino. Make sure to stay tuned. We'll have some more content coming out in the next week.
Thanks for having us, and let's see what happens over the next week.
Oh, thank you.